Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about episode 3 of The Wheel of Time. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're kind of picking up immediately, obviously, Nynaeve is still alive, and we get the side of her story. And this may still seem applicable, because I'm going to be bouncing around a little bit with this notion, but they said that there's 5. Once again, I was under the notion that there were going to be 5 people, but currently there's only 4 people who are the Dragon Reborn. I think Nynaeve is one of them. I could be mistaken, but it's like, why else would they drag her away? Like, why not kill her in the village like everyone else? What makes her so special that you decided to drag her away? So, I think she's unaware of her position in this. I mean, granted, she wasn't around when everything else was explained. She was already dragged away by the what's their faces, the Trollocs. But nevertheless, putting that aside from now, the point is that she luckily got away because that Trolloc that dragged her there was immediately too busy killing the other. Now, why that was, either that was a thing of, okay, you're wounded and I gotta kill you because it's a mercy, or it's a thing of like, right, you're weak and you deserve to die, and I'm a feast on you because that way, it's kind of like maybe amongst them, it's like, right, it's by eating your enemy, you're absorbing their strength. Maybe there's some kind of element of that. Maybe it's a combination of two. Whatever the case may be, she took that time to run away, and she ends up in that cave that she talked to Maureen in the first episode, like it's something tied to the wisdom, and she hid there, came out of the water like a badass, and killed the Trolloc and walked away, and lo and behold, here we are. Because even later on, Landon's like, how did you find us? And she's like, I said you could ask questions, didn't mean I would answer. I'm like, well, she obviously had to have listened to the wind, so she's got to be diving into like her powers and like, because he just everything Moraine said about Egwene like applies to Nynaeve as well, so it's got to be a situation of like she potentially can be an Sadie as well. I think it's so interesting that she holds so much resentment to it. I guess it's mainly because of Moraine being an Aes Sedai, like it makes her like resent her that much more. But it's like, right, you went off with my friend. I guess she never had a chance to go back to village and find out what was what, because I'm sure like they would have informed her. So she immediately after killing that Trolloc, probably like boat lined it. What am I trying to say? She took off after is what I'm trying to say. I don't know what the word I wasn't necessarily looking for there. Booked it is what I was trying to say. God, I'm such an idiot. But she immediately made a beeline to them. So I guess that's why but because she's ignorant of like what's going on. Even Land can't really explain everything about like, well, he explains like, right, the Trollocs are after your friends. So Moraine did what she did to save them. And wants Nynaeve's help, but she's reluctant to give it, even to a point she's pointing a sword at his neck. He's like, we both know you're not going to do it. And even he's like, wow, you actually tried to kill me. So he ends up knocking her out, tying her to the tree, but he needs her help. And so she's like, fine, I'll help you, but she better give me answers about where my friends are, because Moraine's the only one that's going to be able to use her powers to actually track them down. So, which I find interesting, because you would think Nynaeve would be able to do it too. Like, because as she explained to Egwene, it's like, you don't listen to the wind listens to you, but maybe Nynaeve's situation is a little different. Circumstances might be a little different as a full-blown actual wisdom, whereas Egwene isn't an actual wisdom yet, so maybe that changes and shifts things. But she does end up helping her, and it is kind of like, ugh, when you see her like pop the wound and like pus starts coming out. I mean, it is infected after all. What I thought was interesting, she was saying like the relationship between and Aes Sedai and their ward, I thought was kind of interesting. She was saying, like, you feel what they feel, and she's like, this is about to hurt. So either he did feel it, and he was just biting his tongue, and, like, whatever pain I got to suffer and feel, it doesn't matter as long as she gets better. Because it does seem like there is this, like, connection between them. Like, I don't think it's, like, just an intimate one. It runs deep. I think it runs even deeper, like, their connection on, like, a, some spiritual level. You know, I also should also take this time. I haven't talked about the opening credits. I should have, because it didn't have it in the first episode, but it has it in the second and third. I should have talked about it. I like the thematics. I mean, because we're dealing with time, but obviously it's almost like the Sisters of Fate from Greek mythology, of like how it's like almost like the tapestry of fate type of thing that we're going. Like, so I think there's an element of that. Plus, I never noticed it because I brought it up like the Ouroboros in the first episode. The symbol for the show Wheel of Time, like it looks like a clock, but it's also like you can see elements of an Ouroboros in it. Like that it is like the serpent eating its own tail, like is part of the logo for the show. So I mean, the thematics of that. I already kind of made the comparison with, you know, in the first episode, but like the theme is already there, especially weaving in like the Sisters of Fate type of tapestry of fate and everything. So maybe that's what they mean specifically when they talk about wheel. It's kind of like the wheel of like, you know, when you're weaving something, like the wheel for it, like the wool and stuff like that, to like weave the tapestry of fate. Like maybe that's what they actually mean when they are saying wheel. I never thought about that until just now when I'm thinking about in comparison to like the Sisters of Fate and the tapestry itself. But nevertheless, obviously, like we're bouncing back and forth between 3 different stories because we've got everything with Perrin and Egwene, because now they're trying to decide where they're going to go. Like, because Egwene's thinking like, oh, we should go back home. That's most likely where Rand and the others, that's where Rand and Matt would go. But Perrin is like, no, Rand would go to the tower. It's like, no, he was so against it. But it's like, no, he'd go where he'd think you'd go. Because, you know, Egwene was so knows, like, he was the most, like, against, like, yeah, going for it to the White Tower. But even Matt was like, no, let's go back home. It's like, no, that's not where Egwene would go. She would go to the tower. So, you know, Perrin knows Rand pretty well. But aside from that, they're like running and trying to get away from some wolves as they enter like a plain, like a wide open plain. And it's interesting because like the wolves keep getting tied to Perrin, which I think is so interesting because he has that nightmare where basically Layla is getting devoured by a wolf. And then also that creature they saw in the dream in last episode pops up again in this. So I guess whatever it is, it's this creature's attempt. Like, I think that's supposed to be the Dark One. It's trying to slowly, like, corrode and persuade. It's trying to get to them. Because she was like, did anyone try to speak to you? So the Dark One is probably like, the closer his influence is to reaching you, the more likely he can just straight up talk to you. Other than that, it's kind of like he's just there haunting your dreams. I think that's what that's supposed to be until he can completely, like, erode you. Because the point is to basically take control of the dragon. Like the previous dragon broke the world, this one's supposed to save it. So it is about corrupting this reborn dragon to be the Dark One's like bidding. Do the Dark One's bidding rather. So I even like that thing with Perrin when he was trying to make the fire for the, you know, ends up cutting himself. But he's like, oh, right, was that me or you that actually started the fire? And it's like, no, there's actually no telling who it could have been. I'm assuming it's Egwene. Like, I think her powers in that moment, she was able to tap into it. But they were being chased by the wolves, but then kind of much like the Trollocs with the that previous place they were in last episode, the Shadow's Waiting place. The wolves won't go past the plains, but then eventually it's like, oh, we found this trail. It's almost like the wolves led us here, and even Perrin's looking back like, what? Like, that's so like, once again, they keep keeping that theme like he has some kind of connection to the wolves, and I don't know what that is. Maybe it's some kind of latent power that he has that he's just not aware of. But they end up following the trail to basically a traveling group of folk who Isla, I think it was the character's name. I was like, the moment I saw her, I was like, is that Siobhan from Orphan Black? And it totally is, the actress who plays her. So that was pretty dope. I was like, I immediately recognized her. Apparently, their people kind of get a bad rap of like, oh, we're people that here are going to steal your children and steal your gold. But they're a traveling group of people that's like, right, we open our campfires to anyone. You can stay with us as long as you need to. So that's where that's where Perrin and Egwene find themselves. Now, it was interesting too because it's like, right, do you know the song? And you have to say the whole thing about like not knowing the song. Like, I wonder, are they looking for someone very specific? Because it's like, if you know the song. So I guess like that's what they're traveling around, finding the person who does know the song. Like maybe that's the core of their belief or something. I don't know. That was just kind of an interesting introduction to these people and finding out why what their whole thing is. Like, why are you a traveling people? Do you no longer have a home to call your home? Or do you not want to be bound to one place because you're on this journey and that takes precedence over settling in one spot? We'll have to wait to find out more. Other than that, we had the whole Rand and Matt thing, because Matt was all about like, all right, let's go back home. Because amongst all of them, he has, like, don't get it twisted, they all have family to have to get back to. Like, Rand has his dad, Egwene has her parents. I didn't realize it because he brought it up last episode, but I didn't realize Perrin had someone other than Lila. Like, he had his family too, because he was even saying like, don't worry, my family will look after yours and check in on yours, Matt. And no, he was telling that to Matt. He was like, don't worry, my parents will check in on your siblings as well as, Rand's dad as well as Egwene's parents. So I thought because I thought previously all he had was Lila, but it's like, no, he has family there too. So they've all had to leave family behind. But for Matt, it's a thing of like, he's like, I can't trust my sister's well-being in my parents' hand. They're too messed up. But, Rand wants to keep going forward because it's like, right, if we go back, we're just going to bring more trouble and, end up letting it, like, everyone else that survived in the village will die. So they make their way down into essentially what is a crooked town, because it's like, yeah, there's a lot of bad here. Better be careful and learn pretty quickly. Like, this is the type of place where people stab you in the back. Hell, there's even a guy who's in a cage filled with arrows. And it's like, oh, what did he do? But they meet a guy named Tom who sings a song and plays the guitar, and he ends up robbing Matt of his coin because he's like, right, like, kind of like, that's the tax of like learning a valuable life lesson in this world. Because actually, the moment that guy bumped into Matt, I was like, he actually stole something from you both in that moment. But it seemed like it was specifically Matt that he stole it from, which I'm sure, like, Matt being who he is, like, it hit even harder from that perspective. But and then Tom stole it from that guy, but it's like, yeah, this is payment for the life lesson and stuff like that. But we also met Dana, the barkeeper, and I was like, wait, is that who I think it is? And it's the actress who plays Ren in The Outpost. I was like, that's so dope. I think her name's like Izuka, I believe was her name. I could be misremembering, but I was like, oh, that's a nice name too. But I was like, it's Ren. That's so awesome. But yeah, it's like, hey, seeing you in another, like, fantasy thing. That's pretty dope. But other than that, like, they don't have much money other than for food and wanted a cheap place. But Rand is willing to work. Granted, Matt isn't. Matt's kind of a selfish prick in this regard, but it's also like, he has selfless reasons why he wants to go back. He's trying to take care of his family. He just wants to make enough money so he can go back to Twin Rivers, but also, like, so he can have enough money to make sure his family's okay. I think that's why he's also keeping the dagger. Only to defend himself, but also I think he's probably thinking, like, no, it'll sell for a pretty penny. Because you did notice, like, the guy that was in the cage that was dead, Matt kept focusing on, like, the crystal on his side. You're like, so I knew he was going to come back to that. But essentially, it's like, Matt's like, I'll do whatever I have to do to make money, beg or even steal. And she's like, Dana's like, I'd be careful about that last one. Last thing you want is to end up in a cage. So, but yeah, he's kind of acting as a bit of a barmaid and obviously talking shit amongst, like, the patrons and stuff like that. But what I was really surprised about was when they set up the whole, like, him and Dana hitting it off. I was like, whoa, like, don't turn this into a thing, because it's like, yeah, there's a whole thing between you and Gwen. I was like, I hope it doesn't turn into it, but it's like, because they spend time together and start talking, because she was immediately thinking, like, oh, you and Matt. He's like, no, me and Matt aren't. She's like, no, it's not my business. It's like, no, me and Matt aren't a thing. And she's like, oh, but things between you are pretty tense. He was like, if I wanted a man, I could do better, which I love that line. At the same time, Matt went to go rob Home Dude's body, but Tom came back to cut him down. And it's like, he's, what was it? What's it, an Aiel or something like that? Aiel? Essentially, they're a fighting group of people, and it's like, because Matt's like, oh, I heard a rumor that they were more dangerous. They were just as dangerous as, like, Trollocs, and it's like, no. What happens in actuality is they are a fighter group of people, but they have honor. Like, when their mask is up, you need to be wary, because that's when you're most likely going to be dead. They fight and they kill, but they have honor. And he's like, when they killed him, he had his mask down. He's like, the whole point is a whole bunch of cowards came and killed him because they were afraid of something they didn't understand. For him, he wanted to give a proper burial to his friend. And then when Matt's like, I was just actually going to, he's like, so what are you doing? He's like, because he could tell Matt's from Twin Rivers, because I thought I'd say Twin Rivers. I think I might have said that before. Two Rivers is what I meant to say. But it's like, yeah, I could tell by the way you talk, by the way you're dressed. Beyond that, you can't really always tell where someone is from. But like his buddy, you can tell because his buddy's got the red hair of like him being an IEO. But Matt even admit like, yeah, I was going to rob his body. And then the guy was like, yeah, we've all been desperate times. Like, tell me when you're done. And he turns his back and lets Matt do it. And Matt's like, I'm sorry, but I've got sisters to get back to. And it's like, right, if you're going to rob someone, at least have the decency to bury them. So Matt helps bury him. And he's like, right, now that we're acquaintances, Tom, mind giving me back my money? And while he's reaching for it, Matt had already taken it back. He's like, oh, you robbed me of the opportunity. And it's like, yeah. But he's like, right, hopefully I'll get to see you again, Matt. And hopefully the next time we meet, it won't be you and I won't be seeing you in one of those cages. So at the same time, Rand and Dana are hitting it off because he's like being very vague about where he's going. Because she talks about, because of the wheel. The fact is that, you know, it's never spun in a way that let her, you know, because she'd actually connected with both Rand and Matt, because it's like, for her, it's like, this place is all she's known, the dirt here. Like, we all like come from this dirt, and then like, you know, and a lot of us, like, when we die, the same couple shovels worth of dirt is what covers us, you know. So it's like, she's like, part of the people here have known me since I was a little girl. And so it's like, it's just the type of place you're born into. You have to fight and like scrap together just to get by in this type of place. And then you ultimately end up dying here. But she talks about it a little, because I think Matt can understand like scratching and scrounging to like get to the surface. You know, despite being in Two Rivers, like he still had to scratch and scrounge his way to the surface for his family, in particular, more specifically for his sisters, because his parents weren't really there for them. So, but she also like talked about it with Rand of like wanting to kind of see things out there in the world. I thought it was interesting when she was like, even see a Trolloc. I'm like, that's a very weird and specific thing. But Rand talked about the fact is he had never really given too much thought about the wheel until now, just because he's like, right, I try to do the right thing and then I move on and try to do the right thing there. But for the first time in a long time, like, he doesn't know what the right thing is. And then Dana like gets ready to kiss him. He's like, oh, she's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, oh man, that's a bump. Like, it's not like, I was like, he's trying to explain. I was like, yeah. I was like, good, because I was like, please don't accidentally, well, not accidentally, but like, please don't let this turn into a situation where you sleep with her. But I'm like, good on you. And then she proceeds to lock the door, and she's like, I guess I shouldn't have done my hair like that. It reminds you too much of her. I was like, wait, what? And he's like, reminds me of who? She's like, Gwen. It's like, who the hell are you, lady? And then she grabs his weapon before he could get to it, and it's like, oh yeah, like, I know exactly who we are. I'm gonna wait for your buddy Matt to get here, and you're like, and he's trying to bust through the door, but she's like, that door was made from like wood and iron. Like, it takes 3 men your size to break through that door. But then Rand does manage to do it. And I'm like, they're all displaying some shape or form of power. The question is, why? Like, is it because they all have the potential to be the dragon reborn? Or, like, what is it? Because they're all displaying a bit, like, maybe there's latent... Because, once again, like, the magic is only supposed to be a lady thing, but maybe all 4 of them... Matt hasn't really tapped into it yet, but maybe all 4 of them are drawing upon it in some shape or form, just like Egwene kind of is. On some level, they are drawing upon it when they need it. And I love the chasing through the village thing, but then she eventually surrounds them. And it turns out who she is she works for the Dark One. She gave herself over because it's like, oh, the wheel all the wheel does is continue things going the way they are. Sisters killing brothers, parents killing children. It's just a cycle of death. And it's like, she wants to break that cycle. It's like, the dragon can save us. Once you join with the Dark One, you'll break the wheel of time. We'll just kind of be breaking everything and just be mass destruction. But it's like, once the wheel is broken, we'll be free from its cycle, you know? And it's sad because like, you can understand like why she swayed over to the Dark One, because it's like, this is, you know, growing up in a place like that, you know, a place that kind of festers that within people, like wanting more, you know, feeling like her life is on this road because of the will, like, you know, whatever choices she made have all led her here. So being broken free from the will, and because the will determines so much of your own life. It's like, is my life even mine when it's just predetermined? Like, but it's like, once the will is broken, then it's a form of like, yeah, the Dark One is offering us free will. Tom comes through and kills her. And it's like, oh, that sucks. And even Rand was kind of like bummed about it because he's like, right, because he was bonding with her. It's like, it sucks because like Trollocs being killed is one thing, but like this is a girl, like, and hearing her story, like connecting with her about everything, it made him sad. So he just picks up his sword. I even thought it was interesting because the way the blood was pooling into that dirty water nearby, I was like, oh, like, is that supposed to be like the darkness pouring through? And then it transitioned and it was a neat transition. But I was like, oh man, it's actually kind of sad. I was like, no, I figured she'd be in a one episode. I just didn't expect her story to turn into that. That's wild. And it's like, can we really trust Trump? Tom, he's offering to take them west, so, I mean, not west, east, so, we'll see. They all want to go east anyway, so, but now it solidified it, but she also, like, the reason why she said that, she had, it's like, oh, I had a dream of E5, and they're like, wait, 5? What do you, so, once again, there is a 5th one in this, race and situation to be potentially the Dragon Reborn, so, now that she's better, Lan, along with Nynaeve, end up taking Moraine to other Sedai. That's the, in particular, the lady we saw at the beginning of episode 1. She's, near the beginning of episode 1, tracking that guy down. So, it's like, oh, you must not have heard. We've captured him. A man claiming to be the Dragon Reborn, and there's a guy in a cage. And the question is, because I think even Moraine's trying to sense and see whether he really is or not. I still think my money's on Nynaeve, but it might actually end up being like, no, this guy might be another potential fit. But like I said, I think it's Nynaeve, because I think even Moraine was trying to figure that out. But maybe as a wisdom, it's kind of throwing her powers off, so she can't even tell necessarily, because maybe it's still up in the air type of thing. Of like, so where we currently find ourselves at now, because with other Sedai nearby, she should be able to finally get healed up. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Like I brought up in like the first episode, going forward, these are going to be weekly episodes. So as Amazon Prime is kind of done from time to time with certain shows. So it's going to be interesting to see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.